Hello. I'm not on the screen. My name's Rod Banner. I'm here to chair this event, which should be fun. You're very privileged to be in the company of such an illustrious group. There are... Yes! Well, you're not. You are the illustrious group. Yes. We're tackling some very big and hairy topics today. And what better to have such a boisterous audience? So please get involved, shake your hands in rage, get stuck in. Just quickly, it's up there anyway. On my immediate left, we have the wonderful Emily Forbes, who is founder of an amazing UGC platform called Seenit. I encourage you all to explore it. Next door to her and bouncing up and down with energy is Marco Gusti, Senior VP Creative, NBC Universal International, who has a phenomenal job. I'd like it very much, mucking around with international brands and playing with the agencies as well. And finally, Melanie Moore, whose new and exciting platform called Yeay is essentially a transactional consumer-to-consumer, almost like Exchange and Mart, but with video and much more exciting fashionable backgrounds. So with this team, I want to kick off. This is a big topic, and I thought probably the first thing to do is to ask the team just a little bit about what's going on in the world of, I'd say marketing, but I think it's really about engagement. How is it, and what's happening right now? I mean, as I see it, there's a lot of data that indicates precisely how advertising and the old vehicles are failing, and large numbers of people just don't trust it or switched it off. So we've got something new happening. I thought maybe let's kick off. Emily, perhaps you can give us some data about what's going on.
Sure. So, hi. Thanks for all coming in here. So what I've really started to see in the last kind of few years with user-generated content, we work with large enterprise brands, so everyone from Unilever, Coca-Cola, M&S, and we're really starting to see that actually brands in the last year are starting to kind of embrace user-generated content in a completely new way. When I first started out about 3 years ago, it was still very campaign-led, not kind of conversational. It was very difficult to let brands kind of, or kind of encourage brands to let their guard down and actually embrace their crowd in a real and authentic kind of way. But actually, in the last year, we've started working with clients that we never thought that we would in a way that is much more always on in its kind of wholest, most genuine form. And, you know, from the stats we can see that it's 92%, isn't it, of people will trust, what's the 92?
Word of mouth over
word
other forms of advertising, 92%.
And, yeah, and now the content that we see being published with our clients is the best performing content that they're putting out online. And actually with a number of our retail brands that we work with specifically, it's actually boosted their sales over any of their traditional campaign content that they've done. So yeah.
So one of the other statistics that's quite interesting is that 84% of millennials say user-generated content has influence on what they buy. Well, we have somebody here who's actually got a platform that's creating user-generated content that's attempting to sell things. So perhaps it would be sensible, Melanie, for you to just respond on to that particular topic.
Yeah, but I have to say that our platform is Gen Z focused. So in a way, it's really for the 10 to 20 or 25-year-olds maximum. This is our core target group. It's a marketplace where everyone can buy and sell products through uploading a little product video or through creating a little product video in the app. And what we can see is that we just went out of beta in January, but we see that especially this young generation is loving creating videos, and they are trusting, in a way, each other or their friends, in a way, a bit more than some brands. And this is, I think, the latest stats even say that 80% of Gen Z are not trusting a brand post on social media. And I think this is now the next wave of shoppers and the next wave of entrepreneurs.
Now that's exciting to me because there's been a lot of conversations recently with all the political shenanigans going on across the world around fake news, which I think brings back into question how authenticity is playing a greater part in the way the brands communicate. Now, in a prequel to this, we had a panel conversation with Marco talking about fake news, and he said he's not going to talk about fake news, so I'd just like to introduce him and say, well, what would you like to talk about with regard to authenticity and brand engagement?
Thank you for that. I think from the perspective, we were talking about authenticity, which was very interesting. It's bandied around a lot, and I'm not saying I'm against authenticity. That's not what I'm saying. However, having authentic people or influencers that are non-relatable don't mean anything to me. So you need relatability with authenticity, and that's a kind of important part for us in any case, because I think having someone that's actually sitting there real but fundamentally dislikable is not going to help me in any way. What I would say, which is interesting, is the way that we, NBC Universal, and I'm across what traditionally would be called channel brands, you know, Sci-Fi, Universal, etc. We're moving away from the channel mentality into what is a brand mentality. And by that I mean we are now thinking of ourselves as brands with linear channels attached or other means of communications and entertainment to it. And we recently launched a reality on-demand, I guess, app called Hey You, and this does relate to UGC. And our new campaign is very UGC focused. And the conversation about real influencer comes up again and again. And literally, as of yesterday morning, I didn't have a campaign. As of this morning, I have a campaign. This is going through conversations and focus groups, which is how do you relate to our influencers? They are influencers, essentially. They're testimonials about using the app and how they enjoy it and like it. And it's really interesting for us is how do you create a commercial, which is fundamentally, it is a commercial, but still make it relatable and authentic at the same time. You can't pretend it's not a commercial, because it is. On the other hand, you want essentially to give truisms to other users or potentials, and what we're finding is relatability becomes very, very key to that. You know, someone basically looks at, and you're starting to look at UGC, which is coming from Seenit or other areas, where they become influenced in their own right without actually ever starting off as wanting to be influencers. They're influencing an audience into mannerisms, into buying modes, etc. And this is really interesting for us, the first time we've ever done that. It's a whole campaign based on that, so keep an eye on it. It should be going live in about a month or less, actually. The other stuff for us is really making it socially relevant, and this is the interesting thing, is if you've got a linear channel like us and you want to be a brand, we're starting to look a lot at how we can be more than the sum of our parts. You know, so brands like Sci-Fi, E-Entertainment, they are about creating communities, tribes, communities, any number of those things. But each brand is different. So, you know, when you talk about UGC and you talk about that, you start thinking about what does UGC look like in the future? How do we control it? Do we not control it? When do we get involved heavily? When do we sit back? And these are dials that we need to figure out how we dial up or down. And it's just really interesting. We don't have answers yet, but we're experimenting a lot, and it's great fun.
So the question I'd like to pose is, in the past, obviously, marketing was largely a vehicle by which you could demonstrate the product benefits, or you could somehow describe why your product had some unique differentiation. Whereas today, brands are kind of hitching themselves to other stories that they may choose to tell, whether they're actually brand-centric or not. And I suppose the Kendall Jenner Pepsi and the Heineken commercial stroke content creation pieces are very good examples of how these are nothing to do with how beer or other carbonated beverages taste, but this is an issue that these brands want to engage with. I'm really interested, following up, Marco, with you on this. Where do you see that sort of storytelling going over time?
I think, yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, storytelling it really sits throughout everything we do. Ultimately, that's what we do, is storytelling. You know, even Kardashians is storytelling, trust me. But part of that is, what does that take? And some of the things we're talking about is, and this is not NBC Universal policy or opinion, this is me really talking, is how do you take storytelling and loosen it up, give it to an audience, right? So user-edited content, okay. Do you actually start getting them involved in the whole production process? Maybe. Do you start actually creating whole alternate pieces of content that users can interact with, script, do stuff with? You start getting into a whole world. Some of that has rights and issues with it, and some of that is wrapped into the today, and that's something we don't talk about a lot, is rights and issues and clearances and licensing and all of that when you start getting into the sort of, I guess, the grown-up world, you do have to talk about. You can't just rip music off any way you like, for our generation anyway, and you can't do other things like that. So we are exploring other ways of storytelling, different ways of storytelling, none of which we feel are mutually exclusive. They're all additional. So they all become added on. I don't think you're not going to see the end of great scripted entertainment with high budget, but you are going to see other entertainment that comes through, other ways of doing it. For us, it's really exciting. I think it's almost like liberating in a way, but it's also a bit scary because you don't have the control.
One of the things that's also changed in the way that we consume brands is that we're looking somehow away from the big dominant players towards much more the equivalent of the microbrewery. And it fascinates me that those brands have their own story, which they tell proudly. In our conversation before, Melanie, we were talking about how on your platform, people are searching for Adidas's Yeezy products and Supreme trainers. I mean, can you explain that? Are brands going to be much more short-lived, or are our searches going to be much more precise?
At the end, it comes all again back to storytelling. How are they capable to tell the story right and really to get other people related to what they are doing? And what we see is, especially with teenagers selling Yeezys, or Adidas sneakers on our platform, they know how to tell the story right. And their videos come more across like a recommendation from a friend. They are creative, they are fun to watch, and they are honest. And I think this is a product video, I would say, is nearly creating, it's nearly a new genre, because it's not an advertisement anymore. And this is something, it's interesting that the teenagers on our platform, they know how to create the videos in-app, and to make a fun video in a few minutes. But the brands are still reaching out to us and asking, we would like to have some product videos, but can you help us create them? Can you send a videographer, or can we send you the products to your studio in Berlin and you shoot them for us? We say, of course, we want to have brands on board, so we be very helpful in this stage, but ideally, they could do it themselves and follow, in a way, the rules. The teenagers, show them already how to create this content. I think it's the same here with Seenit,
So this is a really important point. What you're suggesting is that the creativity that used to belong in the agencies, in the wise creative directors, has now been kind of shattered, democratized across a whole collection of young, engaged, and fascinating people, which brings you, Emily, neatly into the foreground, because that's precisely what you managed to make happen, is it not?
Yeah, so what we found is in our platform we have a storyboard. So the clients we work with, we work direct with brands, and they load in a storyboard of what they want their community to answer, to do, challenges. A lot of the audiences actually we're working with are kind of the mid-20s, maybe mid-30s. So they're not as kind of savvy as getting up and getting going, not as comfortable. So actually having that storyboard in place is a way for them to kind of take a step. They know that they're doing the right thing. And as soon as the confidence starts to pick up, we've started now through the platform enabling our clients to ask the crowd what they want to see. So what do you think our next direction, our next episode should be? What is it that you want to talk about? And actually the crowd are now, the kind of community on the platform, are breaking away from the storyboard, still within the guidelines, but are speaking up about what it is that they want to see and what they want to hear. But it is then what is kind of really exciting is that is a conversation between the brand and the crowd, but in a kind of controlled environment where they can bounce things more frequently. And I think with the kind of slightly older generation, it's sort of a more empowering and encouraging environment. But I think that's really what we're starting to see.
So as you see technology evolving too, I mean, things like the Amazon Look that came out last week, where a piece of hardware is permanently installed, largely depicted in people's wardrobes so they can share what they're wearing. One of the things that fascinated me is that if you planted these in the true style setters, they would be driving the catwalk rather than the catwalk driving them. I mean, anyone like to comment on that statement? Is it true?
I think for kind of just from even just some feedback actually from a couple of meetings I had last week, 2 publishers I spoke to are now actually growing a community of tens of thousands of their readers. They're inviting them in to basically drive the trends and fill them in on what they should be talking about, because the responsibility of otherwise them always broadcasting was kind of becoming too one way. But again, it's about the collaboration. It's still about them saying, let's do this together and we want to be part of it with you. And I think it's really exciting to see what's going to come out of that.
I'm very familiar with a previous dialogue around the fact that we can, because we're becoming much more comfortable with our mobile devices, because they're not very intrusive, they're relatively small, they're always at hand, you can capture content that's far more emotionally charged than if you're the other side of a 3-man film crew. And I think what we're hearing is that young people are much more savvy around making this content. It's possible to create more emotional, dynamically charged content. So where is the future going? Will there be more of this type of impactful stuff? Will it come faster?
Probably. Look, I think one of the things that's interesting is we talk about, just thought I'd be a little bit controversial, we talk about millennials and young people, but actually what they're doing is influencing older people. Which is really fascinating as well. I mean, I'm just looking at my daughter on Musical.ly, and I had no clue what that was, sorry. And then I'm now there, and she's getting me involved in it. So this is an old geezer basically doing Musical.ly stuff. We're being influenced by them, and vice versa. I also don't think, controversially, or maybe not controversially, it's not the end game. The game doesn't end. It doesn't finish. We will evolve. It will change. Entertainment will still end up having high-budget movies as well as probably mobile-generated movies. You'll have micro-audiences. You'll have huge blockbuster audiences. There isn't a sort of, this is it. This is the thing that I think I sometimes keep going around. Someone's going like, so what's the answer? There isn't one. It's a journey, and it's a continuous journey. We'll figure stuff out. We haven't even talked about VR, by the way, and I'm waiting for user-generated VR. UGC VR, that becomes a whole different ballgame. I have no idea where that's going to go, and some of it's quite disturbing in as well when I think about it. But I think where it does, the democratization is interesting to me. And I think talking about fake news, I will say this. I think because it's democratic, you will get fake news, but you also get some real insights into quite small communities that would never have a voice. You will have storytelling that would never make it out into the big world because we have that. Having said that, you still will have big budget stuff. And I think that's, for me, is exciting. I think what is going to be exciting is that influencing backwards and forwards across the generation. Not for nothing, Facebook is now being taken over by the oldies. I mean, but that is interesting to me just as a social piece and entertainment and storytelling. So I'm excited just to see where it goes, but I don't think it will end.
I love your comments. So basically, we're here at Millennials Conference, but actually, I completely agree with you. I think that there are older people. I like to think I'm one of them.
I shouldn't even be here,
no,
let's be honest.
Should I. But ultimately, if you're still curious and you're still interested in where the world is going, then I don't think you're actually...
Sorry, I got bored.
You're fine. No, but at least you didn't forget. But if we accept that those changes are coming, let's go back to the headline, which was all about engagement. And one of the things that I find fascinating is that we empowered people to change the game. There was a point where brands could just make a great commercial, or they could appear in a film and throw it at the community that would just lap it all up. Now we, as a community, can talk back. But the bit that's missing is this conversation. Everybody wants to create a one-to-one conversation. The brand wants to talk to you because you bought their stuff. But so far, it's really messed up. It doesn't seem to work very well, and quite often it's programmatically incompetent. The question, I suppose, is how can brands do that conversation more intelligently over time?
Well, I think it starts to see that this should be a two-sided conversation. It's not about them talking to you, it's about them also listening, to you. And I think especially when you look into the younger generations, they want to collaborate, or they want to see themselves not as passive consumers, but really as potential collaborators. And collaborators to improve the products the brands are providing. And I think any platform which is playing into this desire to collaborate is going to make it and engage with this crowd.
So that's a really good point about listening. So brands need to listen and think about what people are telling them. I guess, again, Emily, you've got a platform that does that, allows people to speak back in a way that indicates how they might feel about a brand. Do you have those conversations with...
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually what we found is by putting, again, the storyboard in, it puts kind of the questions in that the brand wants to ask. And I think then a lot of the people in the audience can answer the question confidently rather than just kind of go on rants. Also because it's in a sort of controlled environment, we're seeing more and more of the community, because it's in their pocket, they know they're talking in a safe place direct to the brand. They actually open up in a completely different way. Kind of almost like less about the branding. We're starting to do so much more in internal comms with some of the largest organizations, because actually they're using our platform to listen to their employees. They're hundreds of thousands, sometimes employees all over the world. And actually, when we first started working with these brands, they'd collect the video in and be like, shh, don't tell anyone, what are they saying? Oh my God, da, da, da. Now, actually, these brands are publishing this content on YouTube, on their social pages. They are admitting to a mistake and they're actually acting on it. So I think listening and kind of showing that they're listening by putting out comments from their community, whether it is customers or it is employees, and acting on it is incredibly powerful. And we've seen it spark amazing conversations which have gone all over the world.
So Marco, I'm going to pick on you now as a representative of the media, because what we're, I guess, seeing and talking about is creating more content, more stuff. There's already a tsunami of stuff in my inbox and in the various messaging platforms and social platforms. We all have to deal with too much already. So how are the media owners going to punch through, and how are consumers of media going to make the selection of what they are going to consume and what's going to actually fascinate them?
I have no idea. Well, I wouldn't, would I? I mean, it's something that what we tend to do, and if you look at it from the perspective, the usual conversation is quality will out. Right, so that's good. A good story will be something that people want to listen to. Well produced. I think the truth of the matter is that's a minority. So if you look at what defines a brand, it's not the whole of the brand. It tends to be a percentage of the halo product of that brand. If you want to talk about product, if you want to talk about content, let's say a channel or it's like sci-fi, it won't be the whole of the programmatic, right? So defining a brand is usually a small amount that really is brand defining for that. From our perspective, I think it's still about trying to produce things that matter to people, making content that matters to an audience. So and that starts becoming quite segregated. We're seeing the rise of genre specificity in a bigger way. So general entertainment brands, particularly in pay TV, are struggling in some respect because they don't have an identity. It's very hard to put an identity. So for us, it's creating two things. One is a brand identity, or essentially a truism of the brand, tone of voice, point of view, if you like for sci-fi, etc., that creates community. Therefore, it's a trusted point of view. and then backing that up with content or product, if you want to use the two different words, that means that I trust you to deliver to me that sort of content. However, when you then go outside of that, then there's the wide open ocean of water, and you have other things that come from that might just be, again, they come through just because from social, from viral, or they just become viral, things that we don't expect, or content that's picked up that we never expected. So we try and control it to a certain extent, but we try to be true to what we defined as the branding. Honestly, at the end of the day, though, a lot of it's just a bit of luck.
Okay, so this is an extraordinary and irritating at the same time, because I'd love to talk about viral, I'd love to talk about virtual, I'd love to talk about video that's live streamed, but we've got about 4 minutes left, and if we don't engage with you, we're failing. So questions from the audience, please, if you have any. One at the front.
Hello, I'm Martin. One of the notions I've come up against recently was talking to some very large, successful companies around that are more traditional, and them saying, what I'm offering has a component where it almost competes with them owning a customer. That's my customer. And I had the conversation with them at the time saying, does that really apply? And I wondered, with this forward engagement thinking, do you guys actually still believe in the sort of adage of, I'm a large company and that is my customer? Does that still apply, and is it eroding? Does that make sense?
It does. I'm not entirely sure that we feel we own a customer. I think from NBC Universal's perspective, I think there's two ways of looking at it. One is, do I own a customer through transaction? That's different to, do I own the heart and mind of that person? And I think the two aren't necessarily the same. So if I look at a product like Hey You, yes, we own the customer, I guess, but I don't think we own a customer. We have the relationship with the customer through transaction, et cetera, and direct. Through other things, actually, my brands sometimes have engagement with them, but we don't actually have any ownership at all. I know what you mean, but I'm not sure we're in the right space. I mean, it might be different with more transactional based, I think.
Take another question. Another question? More questions? That was a good one. Come on. See, engagement's difficult, isn't it? Yeah. There's one in the back.
Hi, my name is Nicholas. I actually have a question regarding the influencers. We talk about user-generated content, which also have a lot of influencers that are publishing some advertisements and publishing brands within their own personal posts. And we have seen, with the recent festival in the Bahamas, for instance, that a lot of people have posted some great advertisement posts about it, and then it really crashed out. So what is your feeling about the influencers posting those kind of hidden advertisement, I would say so? Thank you.
Well, again, looking at Gen Z, it doesn't work well anymore. I think there were all these influencer marketing agencies popping up over the past years because there was this great need of brands looking out for influencers to help them get the brand message across. But especially when you're looking at the younger generation, they grew up, they have no memory of a post-internet, post-social, post-mobile world. And they are very sensitive when they get marketed to. And so what we see now, the millennials, a lot was about fame, being an Instagram star or a YouTube star, etc. But now this new generation is coming up looking very sensitive, on this influencers, always posting, oh, this is my new Gucci bag or whatever, and feeling spammed by all these brand messages in between. And so I think there need to be new ways to work and engage with influencers. And maybe it's time for influencers, reaching or doing something about brands they are very, very interested in and passionate about, and not vice versa. I think some influencers are already reacting quite smart to it, and are not taking any offer. I mean, in the beginning it was, oh, fine, I have $5,000 on my account just for a post. But now, they are all getting more sensitive about it and seeing that they are annoying their followers and crowd, and better to not take every offer. And I think we need to work on new ways to engage influencers with brands, and I think it needs to be turned around completely.
I would like to point out that our
Time's
time is
up.
up. So you've been an amazing crowd. I'd like to thank our fantastic panel for their contributions here, and have a lovely day.